Nameless, the one thing you must recall, is Cheritz's best game. By far. And I'm not exaggerating, I genuinely believe this objectively. Nameless is Cheritz's best game, even after upwards of 10 years and over 270 days worth of the two newest games. So what's the big deal? On the surface, Nameless is just a visual novel dating sim about a girl whose ball joint dolls come to life. You'll find the colour pink somewhere in every single image, and one of the teachers at the main character's school is literally in love with a plastic skeleton model named Beatrice, not to be confused with a man named Jumin Han. Not to mention that this guy was almost going to be one of the love interests for some reason. Hello? In terms of the plot, Eri, the main character, dates one of the dolls in each route, unaware of the wizard and her childhood teddy bear's influence on the shenanigans going on in her life, and her struggles increasingly worsen when her teddy bear starts to take revenge by tearing out her memories, leaving her constantly confused, distressed, and disorientated. After she helps the dolls, though, they find the strength within themselves to step up and rescue Eri, saving her from her bear's revenge. But despite how badly he had treated her, she forgave him upon realizing how poorly she had treated him, both when she loved him and when she forgot about him for 10 years. And then they live happily ever after the end, yay. Sounds quite innocent and cutesy, doesn't it? But is that all Nameless is? Despite Nameless's pink and cutesy aesthetic, its themes actually revolve around grief, loss, abandonment, and loneliness. We meet our main character when she is living on her own due to her grandfather's passing, whose loss has impacted every aspect of her life. It's highlighted multiple times throughout the game how similar Eri is to her grandfather, such as the similar hobbies of collecting. Her grandfather had a large collection of books, whilst now Eri has a collection of 5 ball-joint dolls. The whole reason she even loves dolls in the first place is because of her grandfather. He is the one who bought her first doll, and her love for dolls only grew from there. Before the starting catalyst of the game, Eri is alone, and frequently thinks out loud to both her grandfather and her dolls as if they could respond. She constantly is trying to find ways like this to hide from her lonely life and hide from her loss, always struggling with doing everything herself. After her dolls come to life, though, and throw her world into chaos, she doesn't automatically stop grieving just because she's no longer alone. The effects of her grandfather's loss still echo across every route of the game in a variety of ways. Of course, these themes are not portrayed only through the character of Eri. Her struggles with loneliness are reflected in all of the other characters too, even including the side characters. But each character's exploration of loneliness is unique and beautifully developed, and Nameless's fantastic character writing is what really solidifies it as Cheritz's best game. In this video and the following, I'll be discussing each character's reflection of the game's main themes, starting with Lance. The first doll to arrive in Eri's collection is Lance, originally bought for Eri by her grandfather. He is the most popular of all of Kroby Doll's products, and he has such huge appeal because he is intentionally designed without a specific personality, so that the owner can project whatever ideas they want onto him. This is a good idea for a doll in theory. However, Kroby Doll knowingly gives all of its dolls souls in Nameless, meaning that they created Lance without a personality or individuality, but with a soul, a conscience, sentience. There is no specific order the player has to complete the game in, but Lance's route does a fantastic job of being an introduction to the rest of the game. Lance struggles with feeling like he'll be left behind or forgotten, because all of the other dolls have much more vibrant, attractive, and unique concepts that are much more memorable than his own. Another important concept central to Nameless that Lance introduces to us is the idea that Eri is the doll's entire world. Because Lance's personality is determined entirely by his owner, everything that Eri shows to him becomes everything he is. His entire universe, his likes and dislikes, his memories, are all determined by her. Consequently, he is led to be consumed by the fear of her abandoning him. Not only would it obviously hurt to be abandoned by someone who he loved so much, But everything he had ever known would just completely disappear if he were to be forgotten by Eri. Who would he be without her? And who would he be without his memories of her? Lance, of course, worries that he will be abandoned by Eri because he doesn't believe that there are any reasons to prefer him over the other dolls or other people, especially when all of the other dolls are so unique and have such strong and eye-catching personalities. During Lance's route, Eri endeavours to prove him wrong. In every route, Yuri gifts everyone with brand new smartphones, prompted by his hatred for Eri's old flip phone. She never took issue with her phone being an old model, but accepted the new one on Yuri's request on the condition that he gave one to everyone else as well. Because she'd never even used a smartphone before, she finds it very difficult at first to operate and then becomes frustrated with it. Soon enough, she ends up losing it at school and has no idea where it is. She could easily buy a new one. They're expensive, but she out of everyone knows that Yuri would jump at the chance to buy her another trinket. But despite how replaceable it may be, and despite how difficult it was for her to even use, she refused to give up when looking for it and spent all day after school searching. Upon hearing about what happened, Lance is told that the smartphone's significance to Eri doesn't boil down to just the serving of a purpose, but is significant because of its sentimental value. Yuri gave it to her out of his own pocket. There were pictures on there of all of the dolls. Soy helped her download and use apps. The smartphone could in theory be replaced, but not the memories and feelings that were attached to it. And for that reason, Eri felt genuinely moved by its loss. This confuses Lance, as he had no idea that objects could hold such value to her. He asks her if she would miss him if she lost him. And in return for the reassurance, he takes it upon himself to search the school for Eri's phone as well, and is the one to find it the next morning and give it to her. A very cute moment indeed. This is potentially the most significant point in Lance's route, the revelation that allowed the rest of Lance's character development to even become possible at all. In the rain scene, Lance explains to Eri the reasons behind his insecurities, but without the realization of Eri's attachments to the inanimate objects around her, I believe he would not have had the confidence to confess to her in the very end. It's a simple scene, but a very powerful one that I can personally relate to greatly, and will be remembered as one of my favourite scenes in the game. Lance is the only one of Eri's dolls, apart from Nameless of course, who knew Eri's grandfather when he was alive, and so was the only one who has been standing by her since before she was completely alone. Lance himself doesn't express much sadness over the old man, but does say that he was a good person and understands exactly how his loss affected Eri, was the only one who saw her at her very worst, the one who knows the most about her. In this way, Lance of course acts as the best introductory route to the game, and ties in very well to Nameless's storyline, drawing his and Nameless's roots into a neat circle, mirroring each other quite perfectly. Yeonho is Eri's second doll, bought not too long after Eri lost her grandfather. Unlike Lance, Yeonho was bought second-hand, meaning that someone else had already owned him and then abandoned him. Already this is a depressing start to the route. Lance had only feared the possibility of abandonment, whilst Yeonho has sadly already experienced it before. This makes Yeonho's fear that much more real. That should give you a good idea of how this route is going to play out. Yeonho, first and foremost, can be understood to be a people pleaser. At school, all of the dolls are immensely popular, but Yeonho specifically finds it difficult to set boundaries between him and his fans, so he consequently is pushed to do what they ask of him, take the presents offered, answer every question asked. At first, Eri just thinks that Yeonho enjoys the attention and that his fans are his friends, but it's clear, at least to the player, that Yeonho only agrees with them all out of politeness because he isn't confident enough to say no to them. However, one of the presents his fans give him fascinates him. It looks in the beginning a bit patronising, a picture book targeted towards children. The contents intrigue him when he finds the image of a merry-go-round, but he becomes obsessed with merry-go-rounds when he learns that Eri has fond memories of them from her childhood. He was already obsessed with Eri in the first place, talking to her constantly, always texting her, valuing her opinion above everything. But after learning about her love for merry-go-rounds, he secretly starts a part-time job, purely for the purpose of saving money to treat Eri to a daily amusement park. This knowledge gives the idea that Yeonho is simply very shy socially, but dedicated when showing his love and care for someone. But further into his route, it is revealed just how much his fear of abandonment controls and consumes him. His previous owner turns out not to be nearly as kind as Eri, and actually treated Yeonho terribly when she owned him. When she met him, she was excited and loved him, but it wasn't too long before she became bored of him and more interested in other dolls. She abused him and enjoyed hurting him for fun or as a punishment for his bad behaviour. In the end, she simply sold him without a second thought. Obviously, being sold completely destroyed Yeonho. He always tried to be a good boy for his owner, but nothing mattered when it was inevitable that she would throw him away after treating him so poorly. Because of the painful memories of being abused, mistreated and abandoned, Yeonho then decided to try even harder to be a good boy for his owner, for his master, so that he might never suffer such pain again. We see his fear manifest through resorting to destructive behaviour under the impression that it will prevent abandonment. When they finally go to the amusement park, he forces himself to go on the fast roller coaster with Eri despite how sick and pale it makes him, and he continuously insists that he's fine. After Eri takes him home and looks after him, he feels such regret that he decides to try even harder to make her happy. And in the following chapters, his obsessive and possessive behaviour gets increasingly worse, taking up all of her time and growing cold towards his fans. In response to his obsession, Eri concludes that Yeonho needs to take a break from being around her because she indulges his possessive nature too much. Yeah, bad decision. On this day, Yeonho has to stay behind after school for cleaning duties and so cannot see Eri at Banjul in person. He clings to his phone and constantly texts her, but she's today decided not to reply. Completely alone and without Eri to reassure him, he deduces that he has been abandoned. When Eri realizes that she was wrong to ignore him, she finds him soaking wet and freezing cold in the rain, hopeless beyond comparison. Eri vows not to ignore or forget him again, keeping him warm in her own bedroom. Thanks to this, Yeonho decides to trust his owner. She came back, she promised. When he was at his lowest point, she was there. She wouldn't leave again, would she? But then she leaves again. Her parents call and she has to leave, gone for hours. Would she initiate a conversation if he didn't text first? This frightening experiment leads Yeonho not to hear from Eri until the moment she gets home from dinner with her parents. He's had enough. He tried to be good and pretend to be fine for her. He tried to be with her all the time and show her just how much he needed her, but it still didn't work. There are still those who are more important to her than him, and there's only one way that will end, with her forgetting about him and leaving him behind. If the player makes the wrong decisions, this causes a bad ending in which Yeonho decides that if he can't be Eri's number one, then no one can, and he attempts to kill her in a blind rage. Thankfully though, our good ending comes to fruition after Eri reassures Yeonho that he will always be loved and cherished, no matter what, that her love for him is unconditional. Eri tells Yeonho about the stories her parents told her about when she was a child who loved a teddy bear so much she took it everywhere. But hearing this story, Eri had no idea it even happened because she had no memory of the bear whatsoever. Realizing that Yeonho reminded her of the forgotten teddy bear's sad story, she rushed to apologize for neglecting him, and understood that his pain is greater than she knew. At the very end of his route, Yeonho understands that he doesn't have to fear being thrown away or punished, no matter what he does. And so he becomes much more comfortable with Eri and with himself as well, joining a club and pursuing hobbies outside of Eri. When he feels ready to, he tells her about his past and confides in her when he feels scared. Yeonho's character illustrates the fear of suffering abuse and violence and the desire to avoid and prevent it at all costs. His three bad endings manifest this fear in the form of the trauma responses fawn, fight, and flight, respectively. Cheritz doesn't shy away from portraying the less glamorous responses to such traumatic experiences. They emphasize that healing from the trauma of abuse and abandonment isn't pretty and often requires extensive patience, as well as sometimes having to learn the same lessons multiple times over. But trust can be built up again with unconditional support and love, and this is how we reach our happy ending.